Alright, let's try and watch a closed game. This is Deli vs. Cookie. Cookie is started with a corner. The rule set is same plus wall combo, so we're not going to have any confusion on the rules. And I should bring up what the stipulations are, because that's very important. All decks. So this is not something where we're going to be able to figure out what cards are there due to limited decks. Though when we see 7626, it is very likely we will see cards like 2676 and other 676s, though I would surmise we're likely to see those anyway. Must use 3 level 4s, max of 177, max of 276s, no rares. So, this is one of Cookie's 7/6s, which means only one, if he has the opposite of this, if he has something like 2676, that is all his 7/6s. If his other 7/6 is a level 4, my current guess would be Cookie has a 7/7, a 7/6 on level 4, and then 2 other cards. And there is a huge question of what other 2 cards you would go to when 7/6s aren't allowed on level 4. One of the next most powerful cards can be 6/6/3/2s, but those are a level 3 thing, not a level 4 thing. There are 7/5/5/2s and 7/5/5/1s. Do you think you're going to see more 6s or 7s on this rule set? I think you will see more 7s. Because I think there aren't enough level 5s to amass a ton of 6s. And I think the level 4s will mostly be 7 and change. Not like 6/6/5/3s or whatever. So I think 7s are the target number. So 7/5/2/5 could be a logical card to use. 7/4/1/4 most are level 3s. 7/4/4/4, never like how those play. They're always so one-directional. So I think 7/5/2/5s make sense. So my current prediction of Cookie's hand, and obviously this will be incorrect because everyone has different taste, would be a 7/7 corner that in some way is opposite to this 7/6/2/6. So a 7/7 corner for 1 or 3. Could be either one. Given that he started in 7, I would think more likely to be in 3, not because the 7/6/2/6 tells us anything more about 3 than 1, but because if you're trying to keep it as your sweeper. On the other hand, if you have a 7/7 and a 7/6/2/6, I'd probably rather have the 7/6/2/6 as my sweeper. That's tri-directional cards tend to play better as sweepers. So, also somewhat strange to use a level 5 as the starter. This is a job that a level 4 could have done just as well. So I suspect Cookie put together a hand he liked and was not specifically doing it with a starter in mind. We also know he must have a plus wall in 4. I think it's just incredibly unlikely he'd play this without a plus wall in 4. So 5/7/5/2 is a card I'm thinking. Also, if you start with 7/6/2/6, it might be easy to play like 5/7/5/2, 5/2/5/7. I'm not sure all these cards exist, but 2/6/7/6, and then a 5th card. Alright, Deli starts with a level 4. And he uses a 7/5/4/3, which is a bit more of his style, rather than just using the kind of what are the biggest numbers I can get away with, the 5/2/5/7. It's instead, okay, well, 7s and 4s play nicely together. It can be nice to essentially power up the 7 rather than the 5/2/5 part powering up the 5s. And also, having a lot of 1 gaps is something Deli tends to put in his hands. Like, he is more likely to run cards like 6/5/4/3s than most other players, so I should have thought of him as likely to use this. It's just stuff that, like, always is going to have some plus potential. We can, of course, assume Deli has a plus wall for 2. And it is not obvious that Cookie would. If Cookie has the hand I've just, like, put him on, which is something like 4/1/7/7, 5/2/5/7, 5/7/5/2, something else facing downish, he does not necessarily have that 7 covered. This could be a hard card for him to deal with. I should say, Cookie has won the only closed tournament of the return, an incredible run through the loser's bracket after losing in round 2 or 3 to Kaus, I think. Yeah, Cookie is our reigning champion of closed, and I expect him to play very well here. Okay. One thing Deli's move says is, I'm not too worried about 4. I didn't need to set up for 4. I already had 4 covered. Now, it is possible this is not the case, and he is instead saying, I can pose equal challenges to you with a strong corner of my own. But if I was Cookie, I would not be considering going in 8 or 2, for that matter. Sometimes you can, like, if Cookie took, 8 or 4, I meant. If Cookie took Deli's card in 2, it is worth noting Deli cannot recapture without overpowering in 6. Because he cannot combo back, because the card in 2 can't have overpowered 3. Notably, there are no rares, though I just would assume that anyway, even with rares. And 5 cannot be captured with a plus wall. Okay, he does go 4. So what I was trying to stress with this 5 thing is 6 doesn't work like 5. The number 6 can be taken with a plus wall lock-in. The number 5, can be plus walled, a 6 and a 1 or a 7 and a 2, but it can't be plus walled and locked in. So this is a kind of dangerous square to go in. Now we see Cookie use a 6-6. Does this mean he is more likely to be massing 6-6s? Maybe. Deli should, I think, be hesitant now to put out outfacing 6s. I would also note this is different than 4177, but similarly it could not pick up Deli 7. And if Cookie does have a massive 6-6s, those might also have trouble taking Deli 7. I think 7s were the more likely way to go than 6s, and I think I stand by that as potentially the better route. So if Deli has 8, Deli should play 8. If he doesn't have 8, where are the other options? Or if he has 8 in a way he doesn't like, right? He used this card in 3, and maybe Cookie is doing the thing that some people do in closed, and it's not really in my head, though it probably should be, of like, you just played a card, I should play such that the card you just played is really good. I should assume you don't have redundancies. Now, in random, I think this can hurt, especially if you do it early, because often people use up the card that they do have the most redundancy for, right? If you have 2 of the same corner, you are very likely to get rid of that corner. Later in the game, it can make more sense as a strategy. But in a hand game, whatever card you just gave up is probably like your corner card for that direction. People tend to run 4 corners and 1 kind of utility card. And so Deli has just conceded, presumably, his strongest down left. So it does make some sense for Cookie to play against it. I would be very scared to do this. I would assume that my opponent had play against my starter, but I tend to play a very cautious style. I was looking at some chess engine stuff recently, and there's a feature called Contempt, which is certainly a word for it, but chess engines are much stronger than humans. And they evaluate positions, like the solver is much stronger than we humans. But they evaluate positions assuming that the best moves are played. And sometimes some of those moves are just not humanly findable. So it might be that the computer says, well, this move is equal and this move is slightly better, you should play the slightly better one. And you look at the slightly better one and yeah, it's slightly better. And you look at the equal one and it requires one of the players to play an outrageous sequence of moves. And if they don't, then it's not equal at all, it's a huge advantage. And so in practice, the equal one might be the much, much better weapon. And computers are right in one sense, but it is almost always worth like exploring a little bit when something looks complex to you, because it might be practically devastating even if it isn't objectively the best move. And you can turn up the contempt factor on the computer, which on some programs, which essentially does something like saying, you're telling the computer you are playing a worse opponent. They will make worse opponents than you make, worse moves than you make, now what is the most effective weapon? And different programs implement this differently, so it can be of different use. Generally, this stuff is used for opening preparation, but you can find some really interesting opening ideas by turning the contempt up really high. By saying, so humans max at like 2800 some strength, and computers are like 34 to 3600 strength nowadays. Not that we have the most direct comparisons, but something like that, which means computers are just outrageously better. And so if you tell the computer, hey, you're a 3400, and I'm using this on a weaker computer program, so around 3400, you're playing an opponent who's only like 2500. Turn your contempt way up. It will start spitting out really interesting ideas. Okay, that's a move. Not one of the squares I would have considered. I never talked through what squares I considered, but it would be in some order 8, 2, 1, 6. And I'd be very unlikely to get to 5 or 9. But presumably Deli has built his hand such that he has synergies. So there's a very decent chance he is playing 2 and 6, and there's a very decent chance he just set up playing 8, and now Cookie will be somewhat obliged to block 8. But what I don't like about this is it's very likely Cookie can block 8 in ways that don't flip 5. And in the queue, you usually don't want to be the person who is 5 flipped. So my guess is now Cookie has very good chances. I think, and part of this is that the card in 5 is very easy to slide around. Cookie never has to flip 5, or likely never has to flip 5 if he doesn't want to. So I think Cookie should go 8 here. And I think he's doing well. Now, I should note, Deli, just objectively, we have GBs and stuff, is a better close player than I am. We have lots of data to back this up. So his instinct to go here is probably like more meaningful than my instinct not to, in a general sense. But just because someone is better than you at something does not mean you can't. And also, he can see his cards and I cannot. And that obviously makes an enormous difference. But just because someone is better than you at something doesn't mean you won't notice things they don't see or have instincts they don't have. So, like, in open, I obviously have a big ego and consider myself very good. In closed, I obviously have an ego as well. But I recognize a lot of the players playing are just better than me at closed. But that doesn't mean I can't have useful thoughts and useful contrasting thoughts. Not just going like, yes, they're better than me. This move must have been better. Try to understand it. I assume Deli is seeing a lot of synergies and setups. But what I'm seeing that's worrisome is I don't know how much those synergies and setups matter if 5 never flips. And with 5's really high numbers facing out, Cookie controls when 5 flips. And maybe Deli is betting that Cookie's like, doesn't have good play on 2 or 6, and he's actually going to try to leave those squares open. That's possible. Cookie does go 8. He uses the 7-4-4-4. Cookie playing cards together that I would just not have predicted together, which is definitely not criticism, because that means those cards are hard to predict, and having unpredictable cards is really useful. But I think this move has a problem, which is it flipped 5. And that's actually a really dangerous card to flip. So now, let's say Deli slides and pick your choice. Say Deli has really good play in 2 and worse play in 6. If Deli slides in 6 now, and Cookie takes from 9, then Cookie will go up 7 to 3, and then Deli plays a plus in 2. And the plus is likely to be a secure plus, right? He's unlikely to have a 7 down there. He probably is something that doesn't flip that badly. That's going to combo through 5 to flip 4, 5, 6, and 8. Probably not 9, but possibly 9. And so that's going to flip 4 cards back, and he's going to be up 7-3. And when Cookie, at best, double captures in 1, it's only a tie. And this is why you really don't want to have flipped 5. Flipping 5 is really bad for Cookie here. So if Deli does go in 6, you could say, okay, Cookie blocks 2. The most he can be up there is 7-3. And if he has a really good card for 2 there, that can be a win. That is something to worry about for Deli. He can also go 1, but because there's so much combo potential through 5, so Deli goes 6, he goes 1. If Deli has anything for 2, it's going to flip 5, which is going to flip 4. So he's gonna grab enough cards, he's usually okay there. The one worry for Deli is if he goes 6 and Cookie has a good move for 2. So there's an argument for going in 2, because I think Cookie is less likely to have a good card for 6. If Deli has a good card for 6, I think he should probably start in 2. Partially because the card in 4 has more power towards 1 than the card in 8 has towards 9, so it puts a little more pressure. But it does depend what Deli has. And the only way Deli can have problems if he goes in 2 or 6 is if Cookie has a move in the other square and a really good sweeper for the remaining squares. And then Cookie can win. But I think the most common way this plays out is something like Deli goes 6, Cookie goes 9, Deli goes 2, and Deli can't lose and can win. I think that is a very frequent way for these positions to be played. Is there any point to considering 1 or 9? Only if you really think Cookie doesn't have 1 card for 2 or 6, which he probably doesn't, that your move and Cookie's move in the far corner won't set that up, which is less likely now. It becomes more likely now that he has it, and that you can correctly guess which square he doesn't have. And that's a lot. So again, Deli goes 2. I love this. My contempt factor. So contempt, yes. What do you do if you are trying to maximize victory against an opponent that you think is, imperfect? I had some point when I was talking about that. I've lost it now. I thought I had just come back to it, but no, totally lost it. Yeah. I like how Deli's playing it. I assume he has 6, and he's saying, you need to have a really good card for 6 here. For instance, if Cookie plays 6 and doesn't take, Deli can just take a tie in 1 if he wants it. Now, Cookie really should be looking at 6. 6 is the critical square to check for Cookie. But it's also the square Cookie is least likely to have, in my opinion. Because 2, there was a 1 gap, and there were the 2 highest numbers facing out. 6, okay, Cookie just plays the capture in 1, keeping his best card. Deli now will have the combo in 6. And Deli can't lose if he has that combo. Unless it overpowers 3. Yeah. Okay, so he can conceivably lose. It's pretty unlikely. Actually, though, Cookie, what has he shown? He's shown a card for the bottom, a corner for 3, a corner for 1, and a down-facing card. His last card is quite likely to be a corner for 9. Quite likely to be a corner for 9. And if it's a corner for 9 and he likes 6 6s, there is a chance he has the double number here. I think it's unlikely. I think Deli is favored here. But maybe not, because if Cookie definitely is a corner for 9, or like a 5-2, 5-7 or something, he's very unlikely not to have the double capture here, I think. So I think we're probably headed for a tie, but there is some chance either way, and I would be nervous as hell. I wonder what Deli's last card was. If I was Cookie, I probably would have played 3, 7, 6, 4, and 2. I don't know what his last card was, but I would have wanted to make sure I had locked stuff in. But actually, the way Deli played it, that's kind of scary, because if Deli has 9, you can still lose there. Yeah, because Deli set up this combo chain. Interesting. So Deli attacked it in a way that had higher risk, but also was a little more forcing than a lock-in would be. Now, I assume he didn't have the lock-in, and if he had the lock-in, he would have played it. But this way of playing it creates, a lot of excitement in the endgame. I feel like I lost track of all my good ideas when talking about this, but hopefully some things I said made sense. Interesting game. No idea what's going to happen. I'm going to check the Discord. 2 tenths. I hate waiting on the final moves. There might be a weekly open game happening. Not yet. Who's this account Harlequin? Ah. Alright. So he does have the double capture. Yeah. So we see he did like using 6/6s. And this is interesting information for Deli going forward. Because Deli saw the entirety of Cookie's hand. Cookie did not see the entirety of Deli's hand. What he did see was Deli used a 7/7 and a 6/7/6, and then a bunch of 7/5s. It seems pretty plausible to assume that Deli's last card is another 7/5. No, probably not. It's probably a 7/6. But even if Deli isn't going to repeat hands, and he shouldn't because it's closed, because you don't want to be letting your opponent play open, what it does say is Deli likes a 7/7, a 6/7/6, a 7/6, and 7/5s, which seems very logical to me. He likes the 7/5/4s rather than 7/5/5s, which I think is totally reasonable. I don't have a problem with that. My instinct would be 7/5/5s, but Deli likes more dynamic cards than I do. That's cool. And if you're Deli looking at what Cookie did, Cookie has 2 7/6s for his level 5s, which left him with no 7/6s for his level 4s, and he ran a lot of 6s. Cookie ran a lot of 6s here. So one thought you could have is, what if 6/7/6/2s play better against Cookie's hand than the traditional 6/7/6/3? I was assuming 7s would be dominant here, but if your opponent is running a lot of 6s, or you are, but if your opponent is, you should certainly consider the 6/7/6/2. I think that is one cool thing. I think there were some sets. There was a match which Akiyama played in the either Triad Wars or TTAC, one of the last two standard majors. And I think he did a really nice job of picking out that 6/7/6/2 would have more play than 6/7/6/3. If I'm Deli, I'm pretty happy with this game because I'm happy with a second turn tie on a set that includes level 5 because level 5 cards are such good sweepers. And also, I would think I had some advantage after the queue was set up. I think Cookie should not have put 4/4/7/4 in 8. Now, I realize that card didn't have much play anywhere else, but I think he should have put 3/7/6/4 in 8. Now, I get that he doesn't have 2 or 6, so those are problem squares. I guess he needs 3/7/6/4 for 2. He doesn't have 6. So maybe 5/6/2/6 in 8, and I get 4/4/7/4 is kind of dead there. So maybe he just didn't have a good way to play it. But if you can slide there, you should be doing great. Yeah, I think you play 5/6/2/6 in 8, and your idea is to put 4/4/7/4 on the right and 3/7/6/4 on the left. And maybe you really struggle if Deli goes in 1 after you go 8. Yeah, 1's a problem for you there. Maybe a tough position. Yeah. Alright, so maybe I strongly underestimated Deli's move in 5, but I think it's also possible that Cookie's hand just happened not to play well after, and he didn't have a good way to go into the queue, but that in general he had real chances. Though I think that endgame ended up being, I mean, I don't know who to say that was better for. Closed is scary.